Hello Whiskey High Rollers, this is WhiskyWhistle and I'm your host Mark, bringing you Whiskey Review number 62. Today we're going to be looking at perhaps the most famous whiskey brand in the world, the Glenlivet. This is also the number one in sales Scotch whiskey brand also in the world. Anyway, more on that soon. It's a single malt. It is from the Speyside region. Speyside is a region of whiskey making within the Highlands, in fact. And this particular one, the Glenlivet, quite famous. It's got a long history. It was established in 1824. And today we're going to be looking at the Master Distiller's Reserve. Okay, so let's have a look at that one. I'll bring it a bit closer. This is a miniature that I found here in Korea. And I'm quite lucky because this is apparently mostly a travel retail exclusive found at duty-free shops. This was the first of the range to come out. There are now 3 different whiskeys within this Master Distiller's Reserve series. Anyway, so that's the first one. What does it say here on the front? The Glenlivet Single Malt Scotch Whiskey, the Master Distiller's Reserve. And boy, that is too small for me to read at this late hour. It's quite late here in Seoul, South Korea, where I reside. Okay, I'm Canadian. This is where I live. And well, let's get that poured, shall we? My trusty Glencairn glass, which is actually embossed with the Glenlivet there. Hopefully you can see that. I got that at a whiskey tasting here in fact. Pardon me. Let's get that poured. Well, I'm very glad that I've done that because now I am committed to this particular video. This is my 4th attempt at recording this one. Interesting. Now, 50 milliliters, so that is a very nicely filled Glencairn glass. It's nice to know how much that is in the glass too, so that you can be aware. So there it is. And already I can see some very interesting legs developing. Color-wise, that is perhaps just a hair under what you would call amber. Okay, so perhaps a medium gold. And this is 40% alcohol by volume. Master Distiller's Reserve. The Master Distiller, Alan Winchester, well, he created this one for travel retail, and it's interesting in that they've used 3 different casks to make this one. One they call traditional barrel, traditional cask. Another they call ex-bourbon, first fill bourbon cask. And the last one is an ex-sherry cask. So quite interesting. All right, let's get that set down. We're going to leave that for a few minutes. I would guess this age to be roughly plus or minus 12 years. The 12-year-old Glenlivet, this is was the basic Glenlivet that was, found everywhere all over the world, that was part and parcel of the reason why this brand became so well known and so well loved. The 12-year-old, priced very attractively, available pretty much everywhere, and well, anybody can have that, a taste of that, and say yes, that is good. Okay, now the 12-year-old has been withdrawn from some of the markets. I think Europe, it's no longer available, replaced by what is known as the Founder's Reserve. And you can see some pictures flowing by on the iPad there of both of those, the 12-year-old and the Founder's Reserve. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the distillery, okay? And before that, there will be a very short advertisement right here. Welcome back. The advertisements that you see here on WhiskyWhistle's YouTube videos hopefully will eventually support some of the reviews that I'll be doing. I spent a lot of time researching, some time sourcing the bottles themselves, and of course also doing some research of the taste, i.e. tasting them over multiple occasions to see what I discover, what I can find within that bottle. Unfortunately, this one I cannot, but I'm very happy that at least we can taste it together. If you do have a bottle of this, why not crack it open, get it poured, and why not share this with me? All right, so here we are. The Glenlivet, as I mentioned, Ballindock in Moray. The water comes from Josie's Well, and it was established in 1824. They now have 14 stills, 7 wash stills and 7 spirit stills. And just confirmed today through Twitter from a very nice gentleman named Ian, who is actually employed by the company, 10.5 million liters of pure alcohol per year is the capacity of these stills. That is also likely their output. And I mentioned that they were the #1 selling single malt Scotch whiskey brand in the world, and they do that with what looks like roughly 13,692,857 700 milliliter bottles were sold. I believe that would have been the year 2014. 9,585 liter bottles. So that's how many liters? So as I mentioned, nearly 13.7 million 700 milliliter bottles. That is a lot of whiskey. And the stills producing 10.5 million liters of pure alcohol per year. How much is that? Can you imagine? Well, I wanted to give you a visual of it, and maybe I should have put that on there. But I'd like you to imagine an Olympic-sized swimming pool, 25 meters in length, 10 meters in width, ranging from 1 meter in the shallow end to 2 meters in the deep end. Okay, have you got that imagined? You can probably find a pool like that in every local district where swim clubs meet and do their swim events and their matches and their meets and so on. Okay, so that's the size of pool. Now imagine 28 of those, 28 pools of that size filled with the Glenlivet. And that gives you a picture of what 10.5 million liters of pure alcohol would look like. Have you got that? That's a lot of whiskey. Okay, so right, I mentioned they overtook another company by the name of Glen something. I won't mention the competitor's name. I guess sometime in the last couple of years. They were neck and neck, and the Glenlivet had a very, very strong year. I think they achieved 7% sales volume growth, while the other had a flat growth. Anyway, the race is on, so they say. Okay, so 1824 was when it was founded by George W. Smith, I believe is the person's name. George and J.G. Smith, pardon me. George is the senior, J.G. is the junior. So the son, father-son outfit. And the stills, the distillery ran continuously right up until World War II. It did close at that period, as many, I believe all of them did, and has continued to run since. And other interesting things, 1953 to 2000, they merged with Glengrant. So it became known as Glenlivet Glengrant Distillers. Then they added some other single malt whiskey distilleries, such as Longmorn, and they became, I believe, the Glenlivet Distillers Limited. And interestingly, there's another Canadian connection here. I'm sure you know who that was. Seagram. Seagram bought the Glenlivet Distillers Limited in 1977, and that ran until 2000, when Seagram's spirits business was dissolved and split up between all of the big players, mainly Pernod Ricard and Diageo. And Pernod Ricard is the one who acquired this particular brand, and aren't they lucky? Okay, so Pernod Ricard, the owners of the Glenlivet, and I believe they're doing a very nice job of it as well. Anything else to say? I've mentioned the master distiller, Alan Winchester. He has been there for a while. Apparently, there haven't been that many master distillers at the Glenlivet. In other words, when they get the job, they keep it for their lifetime. So he will likely be with the company for many a year to come. So Master Distillers Reserve, 40% ABV, triple cast, I've mentioned that. And as many people want to know, does it have any additional color added? Is it chill filtered? I'll just say maybe, probably. And again, the age plus or minus 12 years, okay? So this is my first time with this Glenlivet. I have had a couple of bottles of the 12-year-old that came and went last year. They went very quickly, I should say. Okay, so we'll try that together. Now this has a very different nose from the Glenlivet 12-year-old. Also, another one I've tried is the Glenlivet 16-year-old Nadura. I have one more of those tucked away somewhere. So very different from both of those. And my nose is noticing a lot more of the sherry influence, because the 12-year-old, I believe, does not have any, perhaps a little, I'm not sure, but I don't think it has any sherry casks involved whatsoever. And if I remember actually quite factually that the 16-year-old Nadura also relied straight on ex-bourbon casks, 100%. Anyway, so very different. This has a lot of spice. It's got vanilla and caramel up the yin-yang. Yeah, very spicy. Bit of ginger. Touch of cinnamon. Oddly, a little bit of Chinese 5-spice as well. And touch of dried fruits. I don't notice any nuttiness here, which is interesting because I find the 12-year-old as well as that 16-year-old Nadura to be quite nutty. And it does smell sweet, in fact. I wonder what proportion of sherry cask to traditional cask. Traditional cask we can think of as most likely second or third fill ex-bourbon or ex-sherry casks, after the influence of the original content has dissipated, and then they may strip away some of the wood and they may re-char it and use that one. So I'm guessing that's what they mean by traditional cask. First fill bourbon, so that is going to provide quite a lot of the oaky, vanilla, cinnamon flavors that bourbon usually offers. And I get a touch of that there, but it's definitely not a bourbon nose. This is really dominated by the sherry, which is quite nice, but it's definitely not a sherry bomb. So let's say it's at a pretty good sort of midpoint between bourbon cask and sherry cask, somewhere about halfway, maybe a little bit leaning towards the sherry. And rather than raisins, it's more like stewed. If you take the raisins and plums and you put them in a pot of water and you stew them a little bit, get them plumper. Plumpen? I don't think that's a verb. And then add a little bit of cinnamon, maybe a touch of ginger. There's also a creaminess in there. So add to that that compote, that heated compote of raisins and plums, dried plums, cinnamon, ginger. Then put a little bit of milk, touch of brown sugar, and that's what I'm getting right here. All right. Okay, we'll taste that, shall we? And before that, there will be one more short advertisement right here. Welcome back, and thank you for participating in the viewing of those advertisements. I'm hoping that that will help someday, anyway, to offset some of the cost of these reviews. I've mentioned in previous reviews that I really don't want to guess what I've spent thus far, and I think I'm going to have to start thinking of ways, perhaps borrowing bottles from trusted individuals, or perhaps samples, sharing samples. So we'll try that. I'm thinking of maybe perhaps trying to get some of the drinks by the dram, or perhaps Flaviar. See how that would work, and we'll see how that will, whether that will arrive here in Korea unscathed, or whether that'll be, I don't know, held up in customs for a long time. Okay, let's get on to the tasting. Cheers, everybody. Well, I'm going to try one more little sip before I tell you about this. Well, it starts out sweet, and then it develops a little bit of sourness, hint of dryness as well. So a little bit more to the sweet end. And, you know, since I'm tasting this all at once here, it's got quite a nice spicy fruit flavor. I was going to say fruited spice flavor. That makes no sense. So a spiced fruit flavor, and hint of strawberry in there. Interesting. And the finish is actually fairly long, which is quite nice, because I think this is not exactly cheap. I paid 10,000 won for the sample, and well, I believe that as I looked on some of the websites, roughly about 45 pounds. So I don't know, about $90 Canadian, let's say, for a bottle. Excuse me. So about 1.5 times as expensive as the 12-year-old or the Founder's Reserve, which are roughly the same price. Excuse me. If you are just watching Whiskey Whistle for the first time, thank you for joining in. And for my subscribers, I really, really appreciate your continued patronage, if I can call it that, your continued viewership. Now, this one, it's really developing More and more sherry is shining through here. And in a great way. But I'm still not going to call it a sherry bomb. So I'm not quite getting a wine gum candy nose, but it is developing there in the background very nicely. And then you've got the cinnamon and vanilla also coaxing out flavors in there too. So really interesting. And more brown sugars developing. And this is not just the light brown sugar, but getting onto the darker end, the Demerara. Here in Korea, they just call it black sugar. All right, we're going to try that again. Poached pears comes to mind with a good amount of cinnamon added and a little bit of ginger. And then perhaps after it's been poached, a little bit of sugar has been sprinkled on top and then broiled on the upper burner a little bit, just to maybe get a little bit of that caramelization going on. Very nice velvety mouthfeel as well, which is, you know, a little unusual given that it's 40% and given that it's likely chill filtered. The finish, I'm getting a bit of oaky dryness, so some good tannins. Vanilla, brown sugar. Just a hint of dried plums to carry you off. Well, that is a quality dram, I have to say. Now we're going to add a little bit of water. I've got about 30 milliliters left or so. So I am going to be a little bit cautious. So we'll add about 1.5 or 2 milliliters in there. And we will try to coax a little bit of quick blending of this water. Well, anyway, so to talk a little bit about the Glenlivet and the current state of affairs there. Well, I don't think that they probably didn't expect to be the #1 and to have such a great year and to be pushing out so many boxes of whiskey all over the world. So perhaps they may have been caught a little bit off guard, but they did up the still count very recently. So that is going to be very helpful once that whiskey from those years that they've had the 7 times 2, the 14 stills, once that becomes of age, then they'll be well prepared for the future. The Glenlivet also is used in many of the Pernod Ricard blends, which include Chivas Regal, some blends that are only available here in Korea largely, called Imperial, And another one that I hope to do a review of called Something Special. So likely there's a bit of Glenlivet in a lot of these blends, and if they don't have the stock, boy, that's going to be very difficult to maintain shipments of older and even younger single malts. So I guess that's maybe why Founders Reserve has appeared, and in travel retail, rather than simply do the traditional big bottle, like 1 liter bottle with a bit of a discount at duty free, make something different. So I think that's been a really, really good idea, and relieves a bit of stress in terms of their stock. So, like if the average age of this is 12 years, then there could be some 9 and 10-year-old whiskey in there, so that can help. And as long as that is flavorful and is approved as far as the flavor is concerned, should be fine. Of course, some would like to see an age statement all the time, and I'm not sure. I really haven't made my decision on that. I think value for money is important, and the price point they're selling this at, I would say it is still definitely value for money. So that's my 2 cents. And this the Master Distiller's Reserve, so they've added 2 new versions, one of which is a Solera vatting. So they are following suit of another distillery that does a nice Solera vatting. I've done a review of that before, so I would certainly like to try that one. Perhaps in a few years, because the Solera vat, it's continuous. So they just started. So once you get 10 and 20 years into the future, then there could be some very interesting things going on in that vat. The other one they've done is a small batch, and you can see photos rolling around on the iPad. Okay, so with water, how does the nose change? A lot more spice, in fact. I'm still a bit stuffed up from this cold I had over the winter. Hopefully the nice warm weather will root out the last of it. Yeah, it's a lot spicier. And some sweetness there too. I think I just splashed a drop of that in my eye. That could hurt. Yes, it stings a little bit. Do not get whiskey in your eye. Sweeter and spicier, in fact. So that's quite interesting. It's getting close to that sort of wine gummy or gummy worm sort of flavor. So again, I really think there's a lot of sherry cask influence going on here. Okay. Cheers, everyone. Let's try that with water now. Interestingly, a little bit more dryness, and yet sweeter at the same time. That may be odd. And in the palate, the flavor, still no nuttiness to speak of, but there's a hint of something nutty now in the finish. Just a touch. Well, Yeah, spice dominates the flavor and the finish. The sherry seems to dominate the nose, and it's a good combination. It's not trying to be a sherry bomb, and it's not trying to be that sort of bourbon influenced, a bourbony kind of a single malt. It's doing its own thing, and it's doing it quite well, in fact. So for my first Glenlivet review, and to Glenlivet and Pernod Ricard, I'm sorry that this is my first review this late in the run. Don't even know if you're watching. Maybe you are, but really happy that I picked this one up. And I think that if you are traveling and you like the Glenlivet, or you like some other whiskeys like popular sherry cask aged brands, this could be something you may very well like. So what kind of a whiskey score am I going to give this one? Well, it's already in my head. Now, I certainly like this more than the 12-year-old. I'll be quite honest. The 12-year-old was very easy to drink, fairly, what can I say, fairly one-dimensional, excellent quality, but lacking in certain kinds of depth. The 16-year-old Nadura that I tried, this was very heavily dominated by the oak. It was very dry, although I quite liked it. I think I like this as much as that 16-year-old Nadura, which I think is no longer available. It is still available in Winnipeg, in Manitoba. That's my hometown. So if you're looking for a nice Glenlivet, do try that, the Nadura 16-year-old. It is $79.99, and that's Canadian. So if you're American traveling up to Canada, that's a good one to look for. So anyway, what kind of score? This is going to get 84 points out of 100. That is the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for the Glenlivet, the Master Distiller's Reserve. Okay, 84 out of 100. Very well worth the money. Nice quality. 40% ABV, a little underpowered. Could go up. I think perhaps they'll do some interesting things in the future. Sorry for the stutter. All right, so thank you for watching. If you have watched until this point, I would love it if you would subscribe, and you can do so by clicking the link right down there. Okay? Stay tuned. We'll see you again very soon, I hope. Take care.